Wow, I can't believe that.
So that's why she's the world record holder, because she's able to hold the water at a maximum velocity for an extended period, 83.5% of the total time.
You know, someone said to me recently, speed is efficiency in motion, and I guess this is a little bit more proof of that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Movement and Performance Podcast, where it is my goal to help people get active and reconnect with their body. Today, we have part 2 with Jan Prins, where we are talking all about swimming mechanics. So I hope you enjoy it. It's best to listen to part 1 first. And this is also a good episode to watch on video. But if you don't have that ability, we'll do the best that we can to explain. So let's get right into it.
This is where we stopped. Remember the last time we stopped right here.
Yeah.
So let's fire away. Now, I thought, which is very important, we're talking about all this high-speed stuff, is for, let me make the screen big here. Is that good?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay, so people need to know what the heck we're doing. How do we do all this? So this is just a still picture.
Mm.
What's coming here? One camera out of the three is facing the swimmer. This is the frontal view.
Mm.
We also have a camera sitting on the bottom of the pool, which is very, very unusual because most people just film from the side and from the front. We
Mm.
have this camera sitting on the bottom, and all these are all high-speed cameras, all synchronized.
Mm.
Then the third camera is on the side, filming the swimmer as they go past, and that's what we use for measuring velocities. So this is one of our major subjects here. This guy,
Wow.
Anthony Irving, he's won the Olympic gold medal. He's very, very unusual. He won the gold medal in Sydney in
Mm.
2000. And 16 years later, he wins it again, the 50 free.
Wow.
So we filmed him and got some data from him and stuff about a year ago. But he's very, very famous in swimming. Okay, so these are the cameras. See, this is the one that we'll be pointing sideways. And below this in the pool. These are all custom-made frames, Anthony. And
Mm.
the cameras are all custom. These housings are custom-made. We control it from a computer on the side of the pool with these giggy cables.
Mm.
Each cable is $800.
Wow.
So good things no cheap,
Right.
it looks like. So here's the key point here, and I'll show you a real a report, but this is a still picture to explain what's happening. We are measuring progress in the longitudinal plane, that is from right to left.
Mm.
This one is just looking at it from the front, but the software is very sophisticated. We can synchronize everything. And this graph, which you will see in video terms, shows the velocity at any particular portion. And this vertical bar is exactly what the velocity is at that instant. So
Mm.
let me show you a real video here, right? So this is, and the software is not cheap. It's $16,000 software.
Wow.
We can synchronize all the cameras, and what we're actually measuring is the velocity from this view here. So I'll play this here, and you will see the swimmer. Let me actually scrub, and you'll see the swimmer appear. And as soon as the swimmer appears, the hip appears from the side, you see the vertical bar. Can you see that?
Mm.
It tells us exactly we're filming at 100 frames a second, what the swimmer's velocity is at any speed, any particular portion of the stroke. Yeah. So, and I'll play this just so you'll be impressed with how the software works. See, it's very,
Mm.
very, and so you can tell which portion of the stroke is going to go fast, slow, whatever. And we're one of the few people to actually use this. It's the software is from Germany. All the
Wow.
hardware is all from all over the place. I have vendors making it for me. And so the result provides more definition of subtle and not so subtle movements. Now, the program here, this is freestylebiomechanics.com. So that's where they will go if they're going to look at the video on demand program. But
Mm.
here is a high elbow. This is what we need to do in swimming, right? Hold the elbow high.
Right.
If you don't do that, it'll look like this, and you're going to be not very making much progress. So to show that, we use the high-speed cameras. And I'm going to show what happens. We had this swimmer come towards us and consciously drop the elbows. So look at the top right-hand picture, Anthony, and look at the graph on the left bottom. Starts his pull, and then as he reaches, and he leads with that elbow, can you see how the velocity is dropping right here? Over on the left, you see that? It's slipping. And just how much is amazing.
So on the right, it has more elbow bend and velocity is dropping. I'm correct with that?
This video here,
Yeah.
ignore the one on the bottom left, bottom right hand. That just velocities of the fingertips. We are interested in the the overall velocity is right here.
I see. I see.
And then the frontal view, you cannot tell whether the elbow is dropping, but it sure as heck from the side. Watch. You can see, we'll go here. Watch him from the side.
Right.
You see how the elbow is leading? It's very significant in swimming because you put the elbows with all the strokes. And if the elbow is preceding the hand, you're not going to hold the water very well. And I'll go back to the picture I showed you before. Here. He's not really going to hold the water. His elbow is just leading and he's just sliding through. This is what we want. Can you see how the palms are facing back and pushing?
Yes. Yes.
This is the mirror image of this, and that's what we're showing and why that doesn't work. You see the velocity drops tremendously. So those are the kinds of things we use the high-speed video for. Because otherwise you can't see. You can't tell. And
it's too fast, too hard to see.
And the drop-off is 34%, 34.1%, which is tremendous.
Wow.
So that's a serious defect.
Yeah.
Now, remember in that first time we talked about pushing the water back, how important it is that the new swimmers push the water back. Now, watch what happens. This is another problem, what we call a defect. This girl is going to, instead of pushing back, her hands are going to go out. Look at that. So she's clearly not exerting the same amount of pressure. Now, her left arm is doing a good job. Can you see how her palm's facing back?
Right.
But her right hand, and this is what you see. These are very, very elite swimmers. Little things can go wrong. In this case, it's not a little thing. It's a huge problem. Look at that.
Right.
And then I'm going to show you the video. Look at this. And you can see how every time, and this is the camera filming from the bottom of the pool, every time her hand goes out, watch this. Can you see that?
Yeah.
The velocity.
I love that you could see the velocity at the same time.
Exactly. Exactly. So this is a, and again, not too many people do this stuff, so it's kind of fun.
Right.
So that's the research in action.
Yeah, and it's undeniable, right? Like someone
I mean, we're not we're not inventing this stuff, we're just showing what goes on. So don't, as I tell people when I'm lecturing, I said, listen, I'm just the carrier of bad news.
What good news?
What you see is what's happening, so you got to be careful what you do.
Right. How fixable is it?
Oh, very fixable.
Very.
Absolutely. See, the trick with swimming is once you detect what's going wrong, then you can make tweaks.
And I'm thinking more so at the elite level, like some of them are so programmed and have had so much repetition with doing it, so like even with that elite individual, they're fixable.
Yeah, well, because the elite swimmer can make these changes very quickly because they realize what's going on. And I'm going to show you another world champion later on, so you'll see how we fixed it. This is a very, very good example again of not holding the water properly. And I'm using butterfly because this is a great example. This kid was the #3 butterfly in the country for high school. And his son His father swam for me. And when you filmed him, watch this now. When you see his stroke from underwater, look at the top right hand. This little drop here is not supposed to happen. Can you see that little drop? So very subtle. So if you don't know what's going on and you don't look carefully, it's hard to tell why the drop. It shouldn't be like that, a little blip. It should all be smooth. But the problem is that his palms, instead of facing backwards, are now facing the bottom of the pool. Can you see that? And I'm going to show you a still picture of this. Look at that.
Right.
So he's slipping. He's like he's stroking his pet dog.
Right.
So his hands are just sliding. He's not holding the water. Can you see his hands here?
Yeah, I could see exactly what you're talking about.
He's doing this. He's going like this.
His hands are running parallel with the surface of the water, and like you're
Very
saying,
good. Exactly. That's a very good way to describe it. They're running parallel to the surface, which means he's not grabbing the water. It's like using a canoe paddle and then tilting it upwards.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so this guy, he was going to compete in the high school championships, and in 1 week he was able to switch, and he improved by a whole half a second, which is a gigantic amount.
Wow.
Right there, 12.3% drop off with each stroke now. And if he's taking 100 strokes, imagine the amount of time he's letting literally slip by. Now, impulse in all sports, and this is good we're talking about it because I just lectured in my class in biomechanics on impulse. Impulse is force times time. And I asked the class, how is it that the great pitchers, baseball pitchers, javelin throwers, discus throwers, tennis players are all pretty tall? They got long arms, both the ladies and the guys. How is that the case? Why are they more successful? Clearly, because if you have longer arms, you can apply the force for a longer period of time before you let it go. So impulse is force times time. If you can prolong the time that you're exerting the force, obviously you're going to go better. Does that make sense?
Yes. Are they also, does torque play a role in that too? Because
Torque's taking place at the shoulders and all those. But the fact is the overall final
time. Yeah.
The final product is to apply force. But if you just do it with a short amount of time, like flicking it, it's not going to go well.
Right.
You have to apply the force for a longer time. So the world-class pitchers, javelin throwers, all these athletes who have to throw things, they got long arms. You don't have this short arm people make very successful.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It's just more time under force.
Exactly. Now, in relation to swimming, I have this very important question. Why are physically the strongest persons not necessarily the fastest swimmers? So you see these triathletes, big muscular people, there's no guarantee that they're going to go fast. And the reason for that is because they have to, again, apply the force for a longer period of time. So I'm going to show you land-based impulse, right? Large force for a brief time. Of course, when you're lifting something, so the impulse is high. Wrestling, prolonged force for an extended period of time. That's how you pin your opponent. Applying the force for a longer period of time. Remember, these two people are matched pretty closely with size. And so it's not a matter of a different size. A larger person, of course, is going to apply more force. But these people are pretty close matched with weight. So the person who is in better shape that can apply the force for longer is going to win in wrestling. So these are land-based examples of impulse.
What's interesting with this is most powerlifters don't have long limbs.
Yes, and that is that's a very good point. I think it's because the distance they have to lift the weight is shorter.
Right.
That makes the work easier. remember, work is for force times distance. And if you're doing more work to lift something, then you're not as successful because you have a limited amount of strength. So the distance that they're moving also plays a role. But high force is the critical thing. You got to be able to apply a high force.
Yeah, it seems like there's a difference there between like you said, propelling, whether you're propelling your body, whether you're propelling an object, or whether you're just holding an object
Lifting,
overhead.
exactly. Now, in the water, it's not necessary to apply maximum force. That's why the biggest, strongest people aren't necessarily the fastest swimmers. What is needed is to apply a force that can maintain peak swimming velocity for an extended time. So here's what usually happens. The average freestyler, they are taught, and we all did that, to speed up at the end. So this is what it looks like. We see a surge in maximum velocity most often during the last third of the pool. So here's a typical, and again, these are nationally ranked swimmers, and this is a typical velocity curve. Just at the end, we see this zip. You see that? So the maximum velocity is only maintained for a very short time. So here's the swimmer's left hand, and then you see the same thing with the right hand, right there. See that? So velocity is maintained only for a very brief period of time, maximum velocity. So the question is, here's the numbers. How do we get these numbers? From the rise to the fall, about 14% of the time, they were actually maintaining peak velocity. So only 14% of the time during their stroke are their hips moving at maximum velocity. Now, it's not, I mean, the question, I don't even have to ask the question, is this good? If you're only going at 14%, it's nothing.
Right.
And that's because they've been taught to speed up at the end. So you can see this swimmer is doing a little better job. See, 29% of the time. It's a little flatter, right?
And I was just going to say that the goal, you're not going to be able to make that line completely flat, but it's just to get it more flat than it was.
I'm going to show you something. This is the difference. So this swimmer is doing a better job, right? From 14, holding the water for 29% of the pool.
Right.
So you read my mind. Can we do better? Certainly. And here are some world-class swimmers. Now, again, I'm going to tell you, we didn't tell them to do this. All we did was film them. But look at this. This girl, Olympic medalist, world record holder, look at her curve.
Wow.
Again, when we filmed her,
I did not expect a flatter line like
exactly.
that.
So again, I want to preface this. We did not tell her that we need you to hold and do on all this stuff. We just said swim. But look at her.
Wow, I can't believe that.
So that's why she's the world record holder, because she's able to hold the water at a maximum velocity for an extended period, 83.5% of the total time.
You know, someone said to me recently, speed is efficiency in motion. And I guess this is a little bit more proof of that. You know, some people think that like you have to, there's different things, you know, you have to like have a strong engine, you have to be able to will it, you have to be able to push hard. But it seems like this is more technical, and when her technique is right, she's able to increase that velocity, and it really is speed, efficiency, and motion.
Now, let me make an analogy. This is a good point you bring up. When you see a good runner, they don't put their foot down and then rapidly push back and lift with their leg, right? They try to keep their feet on the ground for as long as possible to maintain the stride length. Because if the stride length is short, of course, you're not going to keep the same speed. Velocity is stride rate times stride length. If you have a very high stride rate and your stride length is short, you're not going to go as fast. You have to maximize both.
You know, that all yeah, that also makes me think of cycling a bit. Like when, now I'm not, I don't really have any expert knowledge in cycling, and this is just me playing myself. Like kind of the way you said, some athletes are just intuitive and feel some stuff. But if I'll notice if I just push down, right? So if my foot's going straight down towards the floor, but then I notice you can also continue to get more pull as you curl.
Now, that's another great example.
Yes,
A good,
so the
a
whole
world-class
entire
cyclist will keep their feet on all the way through the entire cycle.
right. So it's like a push and a curl as opposed to just
Absolutely.
a push.
They don't put their all effort right at the beginning.
Right.
Absolutely. In this swimming thing, the people did they put their effort at the end, see? So they had this very brief thing at the end of the stroke. But just
Right.
that's the way they were coached. Try to speed up at the end. And this is what she does. Everybody's doing 83%. Now I'm going to show you another good example.
Wow.
This,
83%.
this guy is the two-time world champion, an Olympic silver medalist. And when he came here, the Australian Olympic team brought them here for us to work with. And this is him,
Wow.
76% with his right arm. But look at this. This is the really interesting thing, Anthony. When we filmed him, this is his right arm and this is his left arm.
Mm.
The peak velocity is identical. See,
Mm.
his
But
right
one's just
arm
longer.
was twice as long as his left arm. That means that he's not paying much attention to what he's doing with his left arm.
Mm.
And I'll tell you the funny story. After we filmed him and he came and sat in the lab, they had all dried off, their workout was over. And so they were ready to go to dinner. And so the coach and these guys were sitting there and I showed him this. And the coach looks over to this guy, Magnuson, and he says, you know what you have to do, right? Got right back, got into his suit that evening and got right back and worked on this.
Wow. I love this.
And the next morning, the guy actually swam faster than he'd ever done before.
Now I have a question for you. Um, do you think that there's any type of a cheap way to be able to measure this? Like, obviously you have all the high-tech devices, but
Not
it,
the way we're looking at it. I mean,
yeah,
some people have got this belt with a little spool of fishing wire.
right.
They monitor the rate that it goes out. The problem with that is because it's so dependent on the tension of the wire, the cable, that it's very jerky. So you can't, there's what we call the rebound effect, right? When you go slow and you speed up, there's this peak. It's like we're whipping, it's like you whip the peak. That's not a realistic peak. That's just because you've gone from slow to fast and you get this jerky effect.
Mm.
And it's very hard to interpret and it's not really as good. There are people going around the country trying to sell this as a technique. And what can I say? I mean, they charge like $200 to measure somebody and they can, make some adjustments, but this equipment costs 100. My equipment, Anthony's was $180,000 and took me 22 years to develop.
Right. Yeah.
Good,
This is
good,
why
good.
you're working with the elites.
That's right. Good things no cheap.
Right.
So,
No, it's very true. Very
so
true.
what can I say?
Yeah, I guess it's maybe unless you like the closest thing someone could do at home is maybe a slow motion camera. I mean, obviously you're still limited, but that might tell you a
No,
little.
no, no. I'm all for filming. Absolutely. The trouble
Yeah,
is you can't be this analytical with that,
of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is great. This is top notch. This is way cool stuff.
Thank you. Now, the third portion of this is that business of body roll that I kept talking about, because swimmers have been told that they need to roll their bodies.
Mm.
Sadly, people don't understand. There was a guy who made a lot of money working with triathletes, and his big thing was body roll. And I just slammed him, and he eventually stopped talking about it.
Mm.
So here's the question here. The subject of body roll is what termed the long axis strokes, which is, that's freestyle. And so here we have two questions. Do freestylers hips roll? Or do freestylers consciously roll their hips? The answer to the first question is, of course, right? Your hips roll. The question is whether they should intentionally initiate this action. Now we're making, so people understand this. When you look at golfers or anybody throwing, we know that if you time it correctly, you can consciously get more out of hip rotation when you're swinging a golf club, right? If you time it right and you rotate your hips just at the right time, tennis serve is another example. Throwing a javelin or anything, you can add the kinetic chain all the way up from ground reaction force because you have a stable base. The foot plant is stable. So the kinetic energy goes up the kinetic chain and it gets added to the final product.
Mm.
And that's only possible because there's a stable base that you stand on. And again, it's easy to understand. If you're standing on an unstable base on a very slippery surface, obviously you're not going to get the same bang for the buck when you're hitting something. So the kinetic chain works, especially at the hips, if you can plant your feet firmly on the ground.
Mm.
That should be pretty easy for people to understand, right? You standing slippery, you're not going to get the same bang for the buck.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I feel like you mentioned that a little bit in the last episode. It made me think a little bit like a catapult, right? Like one thing is moving, but then you still have this stable base. Or
Absolutely. And all muscles, everything needs a stable base for land base. This is Newtonian mechanics in action. Newton's the man here. Ground reaction force is necessary. So you can rotate your hips successfully and get more out of the kinetic chain when you're standing firmly. However, so this is what we say, right? Ground reaction force, incorporation of the kinetic chain. All throwing motion must have a stable base, just like you mentioned. Trouble in the water is we don't have an advantage of a fixed stable base. There's no base that's stable. The stable base are hips right at the core. The only relative stable base is located on the lower torso and hips, what we refer to as the body's core. That's where the anchor point is in swimming. And so the point is, does it make sense to keep moving that? Absolutely not. So if the stable base is at the hips, the last thing we want to do is to keep moving that around. Am I making sense?
Absolutely.
And what we see is, again, we didn't invent this. When you look at sprinters, Anthony, going really fast, their hips are very stable. When you look at distance swimmers, you see a little bit more rotation. But they're not saying, I need to rotate my hips. It's just that when you're swimming distance, you get a little more time to stretch out and do things. So here's what we're saying. Movements of the torso and hips are consequential. Simply stated, body roll is initiated primarily by the arms and shoulder motion, and to a lesser degree by the flutter kick. And like I just mentioned, we see noticeable different degrees of body roll between swimmers competing in shorter races compared to those in longer events. Sprinters, we see minimal hip rotation because to exert increased propulsive forces, a more stable base is essential. And distance swimmers, more body roll. So I'm going to show you a video. And the reason you see more body roll in a distance swimmer is because the longer duration of each stroke cycle allows more time. So I'm going to show you Katie Ledecky, right? Multiple gold medalist. She's the star for the last 3 Olympics. And let me show you the video here. And you can see her hips. See her hips rotating. And that's because she's swimming longer distance. See that? Now, when she starts to sprint, you don't see too much more. And you see her hips are more stable. So, so just the one swimmer alone, we can tell the difference. Okay, and that is, the last thing is, when we intentionally rotate our hips, you all kinds of crazy stuff. You had a counteracting torque. Look at that. People who Go to roll their hips consciously. You see the feet, and we talked about this last time, remember? You said you
Yep.
have to counteracting torque. Otherwise, you're going to completely roll over.
Right. Back in the day, so I remember Mike Boyle, strength coach, he, kind of broke down core exercises into like anti-rotational and anti-extension. So he would train it so that it doesn't. So you'd apply the resistance. For example, maybe I'd hold a band out in front of me and I would try not to let my body rotate. And that makes me think of this very much so that we want the torso to be stable and stiff while the limbs are propelling and moving.
Exactly. And
Yep.
again, everybody knows what happens if you don't have a stable base to stand on or sit on. You can't exert the same force.
Right. I also think about it might not apply exactly, but it still has some application. A basketball that's deflated versus one that's got more air and is stiff. That stiff ball rebounds a bit more, right? That like stiffness helps with force, the transmission of force.
Right. And that's why a golf ball will rebound faster, because what is called the coefficient of elasticity,
Right.
that number goes up if you can rebound higher.
Mm.
The idea of what is called a perfectly elastic body, Anthony, is something that bounces to the same height that it was dropped, which is impossible. There's no such thing.
Mm.
But the closer it comes, the more it can bounce, the higher the coefficient of elasticity. And this is why sports are very strict about that. You can't make a basketball bounce as high as, say, a golf ball, because you'll ruin the sport.
Mm.
You know.
Mm. Very cool.
Great. Well, this is what I got for you, Anthony. I hope. Okay, here's the other thing. It also has a very irregular rhythm. See this?
Mm. Yep. Yeah, you could see a big difference.
How do you like the frontal resistance here versus here?
Yeah, it just looks. I mean, I had a professor also that used to say, sometimes it's hard to measure bad movement, although it's nice when you have these high-tech devices, you actually can. Sometimes it's hard to measure, but you know what it looks like when you see it. You just look at this picture and you could see which one looks superior than the other without even having any expertise,
I'm just carrying the news,
Right, right. Yeah, I absolutely love it. And all the points that you're sharing apply to all sports. That's what I love
Yes,
about this too. No
yes,
matter what, athletic endeavor you're in, the biomechanics and just understanding the body is gonna translate.
exactly. So that's why but you have my email through the university, so send it through that.
I will, yeah. So a couple of things just so all the listeners, actually I had one question that I was thinking about during the week, and then we'll close out and mention some things for the listeners. But the hand, I feel like you mentioned it, but as the hand enters the water, because you were saying that, you want the hand to face backward as much as possible.
Correct.
I
Just
remember when I was first learning, people would say to kind of turn the hand so that, let's see how I can explain it. It's almost like as opposed to being flat and parallel with the water, to kind of make it vertical so that it cuts into the water. And I
Yeah.
think that goes against all that you were pretty much just saying.
Well, when you're introducing your hand into the water, it is
Right.
better to slide it in so you're not pulling a lot of air.
I see. So you are still sliding in because you
Yeah,
don't want.
because if you put your hand in flat, there's going to be a huge amount of bubbles, and that'll reduce the propulsive force.
Hmm.
But once it goes in and enter cleanly, now you have to make sure you're pushing back.
I see.
I'm trying to find this here. Anthony, I think I showed you this, right? The website,
Yes.
this one here. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what, and then people can go in and do
Yep. So everybody knows. So it's Freestyle Biomechanics.
Welcome to Freestyle Biomechanics.
Yeah, freestylebiomechanics.com. And then they can play this. This is the intro, and they'll see what's going on.
Pull patterns, followed by identifying segments of
Did you get a
the
chance to look
code
at
that
this?
need correction.
I did, yep. We
Use
were-
video enhancement technology.
I took away my,
hand motion.
I edited it a little bit because I wanted to shorten it to make it like a 3-minute introduction, so.
Great. And then the other question I was thinking, and I don't know if we discussed it, but how the arm exits the water.
Lift it out as cleanly as possible. You don't want to be pushing up, because when you push up, guess where your hips are gonna go? Down. So when you see people bouncing up and down the surface, that's what's happening.
I see. Yeah, wow, man, this was great. So yeah, for all the listeners to know, freestylebiomechanics.com. There's tons of great videos and education on there where they can stay connected with you. Is there, you shared your email on there. Is there any other way? Are you on Instagram or anything like that? Or probably not, right? Social media?
I kind of, there's a little thing on LinkedIn, but no, Instagram and that kind of Facebook stuff. And
You're better off. You gotta spend your time on the beach in Hawaii is what you're gonna.
I mean, I had to spend my time doing something so people can understand it. I realize I'm already vague with my presentation, so I'm gonna clean it up. But no, in all all honesty, I just don't have the time to,
Yeah,
do this other stuff. I'd rather do what I'm doing right now and share things with you,
I agree. Yeah, and I mean, this really, I absolutely love this presentation. Even part one, I was thinking about it all week, and again, the application to all sports, and
Absolutely.
anything where there's power involved and propulsion.
It's an impulse, we just talked about impulse. You can see the difference.
Yeah. So this whole thing is really solid and had me thinking about so many different things.
Feel free to get back to me anytime.
Yeah, I
Delighted,
will.
delighted now that we made contact, Anthony. We'll look forward to keep in touch. But thanks, Anthony. Delighted to get together.
Same. Thank you so much. We'll stay in touch, and I really appreciate you.
Not at all. Take care.
Okay, I'll see you. Aloha.
Bye.